And welcome again to another tech demo. This time today, we are going to be looking at Unity and how to do some declaring a variable. So let's go ahead. We'll create a new scene here and save it. Call this one declaring variable. So as you get organized with your files, you're going to want to label these so you can find them if you need to reference them in the future. All right. And inside here, I'm just going to start by setting up an empty game object. So that's going to be done by right-clicking here in the hierarchy on left-hand side if you're using the default layout. And I'm just going to create an empty game object. And I'm going to name this guy variable manager. Like so. And that's just a basic empty game object here in our default empty scene, just has the main camera and basic light for us. All right. So what do we want to do next? Well, we're going to need to add a component because we're going to do the C# version first. So with our variable manager, which is our empty game object we just created, I'm going to come over here to the inspector on the right-hand side right here, and I'm going to add a component, and I'm just going to add a new script, and I'll get that out of the way there. Add a component, and we'll just say new script. You can see it's already got it typed in from the last session, but if you didn't have that, just type in script. And because we are doing C# first, we'll do a new script. And I'm going to name my script for the name of my class. I'll call this variable setup. Like so. And obviously, when it does that, it creates my script. It's going to precompile shortly for me. And I should have my script over here in my view. Let's see where it dumped it, probably into the root of assets. Sure enough, it did. So if you want to keep things organized here, one of the things that you can do is create a folder. My tools are in my way. Create a folder for your scripts and just kind of keep putting all your scripts as you create them in your project into that. So in this case, I just created the one for variable setup and I moved it into a folder I created under assets. And if you are unaware, it's just basic Windows operations. You right click, create a folder that way. All right. So selecting my variable setup, I can see, of course, this has just the default selection for me in here. If I look at it inside the inspector, so I'm going to need to double click that, open it up inside Microsoft Visual Studio, and add in the code where I'm going to declare a couple different types of variables today because we're just kind of getting our feet wet and starting with what is a variable today. So very simple lesson today. So let's go ahead and double click variable setup and we'll launch Microsoft Visual Studio and take a look at the code we need for that. So here, once again, we have our default setup in here. I'm going to go ahead and leave out the parts between this bracket and this bracket, but leave those brackets or sandwiches in there. And kind of show you from the get-go what we want to put inside here. Now, I could have left that on started there, but I want you to declare your variables before we get into the on start menu, and I want this to be clear for everybody following this tutorial. So I'm just going to give a comment here because it's always good to comment our code. So I'm going to declare variables, simple backslash backslash. That just makes it for human sake. And the first variable I'm going to create is an integer, and that's denoted by int for integer, and I'm going to call this one score. It's going to track a score for me, and that's going to be whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth. Next one's going to be a float. I'm going to track volume with that. And that's going to allow me to track things like decimals, like 1.35 or 0.2367, so forth. Third is going to be a string. I'm going to call that username. And that's what we use to kind of track things with text and so forth inside of it. So we call them strings. And lastly, I'm going to create a bool today, and we'll track is game over for that. And that's just a true or false. That's what we mean by bool. It's short for Boolean, and it tracks a yes or no, true or false, 1 or 0 type of option. All right. So just a reminder, it was in there before, but I'll type it back in here. We're going to have our comment here right before our start method, and I'll just type that back in right now. And again, start is called before the first frame update, and I'm going to return no value, so I'll do a void start, and then these are curved brackets like so, and or smooth brackets, and then I'm going to do my curved brackets, and I'm going to hit enter in there so that I can get my sandwich going in here. So this is going in to what happens when the game starts or when my program or app starts. And inside this, I'm just going to initialize the variable. So I'll, again, add a comment on that. Initialize variables, and I'll initialize the score. And you can see, because it already knows about it, it'll highlight it up here, and you'll see it start to prompt you down here. That tells you got the code correct. And I'll initialize their score to 0 because they haven't scored anything yet. Same thing, I'll do volume, and you'll notice that it'll start to prompt you. The AI starts to prompt if it sees kind of where you're going with this. So I can type in volume, or I could hit tab and tab again, and it's going to fill that in for me. But if you're typing inside of a text editor or so forth, it may not do that. So you'll have to type these in. So username, you'll see again, it pops it in there. In this case, because this is a string, I need to use a double quote whenever I'm depicting a string. And when I'm using Visual Studio, you'll notice that it'll change the color, in my case, to orange to denote that I am inside a string. And I'll call this player 1. And I need to remember to come over here and end the sentence, of course, with the semicolon before going to the next line. And obviously, the last one it wants to know is the game over? And of course, it's already guessed that false to begin with because the game just started. So I can just hit tab and input that in there. Now, I have all the code in here. We've now technically successfully declared our variables. Very simple, but let's be able to test it. And a great way to test this is to use the debug log feature and look at it in our console just to make sure our code's working. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in here, start to. That way, before we wrap up this very short tech demo, you know that you've got it and you've got a handle on declaring variables. So let's go ahead, do a quick little comment of what this is it's going to log the variables. So making sure they're initialized correctly. And again, to be able to see them inside the console, as you can see over here on the left-hand side, I still got the console showing. I'm just going to use a debug log. This debug.log like that, tab. And in this, if you want to have something, because it'll just give you the output. So if score is 0, you just see a 0 and you might not know, well, what is that 0 to? So I usually like to put a string value in here and let me know what I'm getting as that value. So I'll do score. And you'll notice I'll put a little space in here if I need it. And then the way that we get the score not butted up against that is to concatenate this. And we're going to cover this in the next session. But I'm just going to use plus, and then I'm going to put my variable in here. In this case, I'm going to put score, and I can just tab through the rest of that because it's already anticipated that, yes, I need in my parentheses, and I need to have my semicolon. So I'll do the same thing for the rest of them here real quick. I see I misspelled there. Always check your spelling, even in the strings, but especially in your code because it won't work. Capitalization and spelling does matter. All right. And at that point, I'm just going to clean up my code and double check it with my eyes before we save and go back to test it out and wrap up this. So I've got my variables here. Let me grab my drawing tool real quick. I've declared my variables here. I've initialized them here, and then I'm going to test them here. And looking through, don't see any typos, so I'm just going to clear my drawings there, save my code, close this down, and we head back over here to Unity, and it's going to compile and update my text, and I should see shortly here that Sure enough, my code is tested, and now I can run my app. So I'm going to go over here, press the play button, and because I am not currently in the console, I'm currently in project, I'm going to click right here on console to be able to see the output of those debug logs. So I click on that and hit play. And sure enough, if I stop my playback here, clear the drawings out, you can see that yes, indeed, I did get the results that I expected. Info has been put out. I can see that score is 0, volume is 0, username is player1, and his game over is false. And we've successfully done it. So we will save it, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us for this tech demo. Bye. And welcome again. So after we finish the C# one, for those of you that want to work with visual scripting instead to work on declaring variables, let's go over that now. So in this case, I'm going to create another empty game object, but to keep things a little clear, I'm going to name this variable manager number 2 empty here. And like I said, variable manager 2. And of course, to be different from our C# one, we are going to be using a script graph versus a regular script. Color here, crayon. And we're going to go with that variable manager 2 selected. We're going to go over here to the add component, click on that. And I'm going to add our script machine on here and set up the usual. I'm going to go ahead and change that to be embedded. And we'll open up the graph to work on that. Now, inside of here, I've got on start already in here and on update. If they weren't in here, I would need at least on start because we're just going to initialize the variables, but I can go ahead and delete out the other one. So a little bit different when we're working inside script graph here. We can create and then set those variables. So let's create the variables here using the Blackboard. And we are going to just type in the name of the variables, and we're going to give them unique ones so that they don't collide with the ones that we did for the C# exercise. So I'll name this first one. Let's see what we go with here. All right, I think I named that one score, so we'll name this one score 2. Hit the plus button, and this is going to be my integer type again, so I'll choose integer, and then we'll go on down the line here. Next up, I believe we had volume. Name this one volume 2, and I'll add that to be, of course, a float type variable. Third, our username, username 2, and we will make that a string. And fourth is our Boolean. This is game over. Set that type Boolean. Cool when you Now, by default, it already put these values in here. But just so you guys see how it changes, I could put in here default name or something, because we're going to change these actually inside our visual scripting graph node here in a moment. So I will just leave that there, and I'll leave the Boolean off. All right. So once we've created these graph variables, we actually have to set the variables when you're working with visual scripting. So we're going to go ahead and create a node for each of these now. And I will go ahead and say add node. And we'll look for a set variable by typing in set var should get us there. And these are graph nodes, graph variables. So we'll click on that. And to save myself time, since these are all graph variables, I can just select this and copy it 4 times. But again, you can also go add node, set variable, do that over and over. But as you get more and more comfortable with programming, as you guys get more and more advanced, you're probably going to start Control shortcut. So you can indeed Control C, V, and copy and paste, create more of these nodes in here like so. Now I'm lining them up like this because, as we know, the flow has to go from one point to another. It doesn't split the flow usually. So I'm going to have each of these set one of my variables here as we go through here. So let's have this first one. And if I notice that this is orange and these are here, and because I named this, my double arrow here, because I named this to be a graph type variable, you'll notice that when you click on one of these, it's going to give you the options in here. And I can notice right now, I forgot to name this one is game over 2 so that I don't get a conflict with the other one. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and delete out my screen. Game 2 here. And I'll make this first one, of course, score 2, next one, volume 2, and so on. Now, I can connect the flow to these because you'll notice that they are all grayed out until this. But notice that as I connect each one of them, it's going to get mad at me because it's orange and it's saying something's missing. And you'll notice that it gives you feedback right over here on the sidebar in the graph inspector that says there's a value missing, in which case the value is the input here. It doesn't know what you want to set the variable known as score2 to be. So we will have to create those here in a minute. Let's go ahead and connect the flow through all of these so you can see how this gets connected. So the flow flows through our diagram like so. And because this one, as I know, score2 is an integer, I'm going to add a node for the integer. And this is just going to be literal integer here. So that just literal means quite literal. It is meaning I want to set an integer. So I will set this guy here. And let's make this value 5. And then I need to connect this into the input right here. Not here, because if you connect it to the orange, that's the name of the variable you're looking for. You're not trying to change the name of the variable. You're trying to set its value. So we connect it, and we notice that as we do this, these variables get happy, or these nodes get happy, and they turn green, and the errors over here go away, right? So next up, volume 2. Volume 2 is a float, so I can't put an integer in here. Notice that if I were to add a node, the integer, put another literal integer in there, type a little bit more to it. So it's down in there. If I try to put this in and it's float, it'll take it in there because it's there, but a lot of times the other way around, your float can't go inside there. So we don't want to do sloppy code, bad code like that. So if we know it's a float, let's keep it with the float. So let's add float, do a literal float as well. That guy in here. And let's make this something like 0.8. All right. Next up, username. This is a little bit trickier because this is now script. This is looking for a string or a name for this entry. So we will say add node, and we will look for string, literal string for us as well. And you can connect that, but right now there's nothing in here. So you have to say what you want username here to be. So let's say this guy is called player 2. Little weirdness in their UI there, but it has the correct naming spelling there. And lastly, we can see we're still orange over here, so we have to give a value for is game over. And this variable is looking for a Boolean as we said it. So let's add a little Boolean. Like so here. Connect that in. And you can see a Boolean just has this box. It's either on or off, yes or no. Let's go ahead and say, yep, the game is over for player 2. He's already out of the race. All right, so we've got this all set up. Everything looks green and good to go. Now, how we're going to see this now, I could set up some debug logs and have it all pop out to the console, but we've already got a visual component to portray this for us right here in the script graph. So what I'm going to do is we're going to, here in a minute, hit the play. And what I want you to do is check your values right here because you already have a visual display for those variables. And we can see right now the defaults that we have in here are 0, 0, default name, and off. And if I hit my playback, and wait for the lovely compiling, lo and behold, I now have the new values and my code has executed on the start event. Score is now 5, volume is 0.8, username 2 is player 2, and the game is over for him. So that's all it takes to declare your variables inside of visual scripting. Again, achieving the same results that you can with C#. Thanks for joining us for this tech demo, and we look to see you at the next one. Have a good week, guys.